Let's be honest, in times gone by, workshops were not designed for all brains. They were designed for people who were fast thinkers, extroverts, like lots of social energy, and there was a whole bunch of people who were missing out and not able to contribute. Nowadays, we're much more aware that there are diverse brains in the room, and so we need to be mindful about how we design and facilitate those sessions. In this video, I share 5 techniques that help you design and facilitate workshops with all brains in mind so that it makes your sessions more enjoyable and accessible for everyone. Hi, I'm Kerri Price. I'm the founder of the Facilitators Network, and I use the principles of deliberate generosity to make sure that no meeting or workshop is ever wasted. I've been a professional facilitator for 20 odd years, and in that time I've led thousands of meetings, workshops and community conversations. Now I help other trainers and facilitators do it well too. The term neurodiversity covers all range of different things, different categories and diagnoses, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Where do I start with so many different things to consider? In this video, I'm going to share 5 tips that are helpful for everyone, regardless of what the diagnosis or condition might be. They're small, simple changes that can make a really big difference. Tip 1 is to send a pre-workshop email. Now, a pre-workshop email serves a whole bunch of different purposes, but mostly it helps people who struggle with social anxiety, people who need a lot of information to feel comfortable showing up to a new place and meeting new people. So a welcome email might sound something like, "Hey John, I'm so excited to have you coming to this workshop next Monday. Here's a few things you might need to know ahead of time." And I include all of the usual logistics like where the workshop's being held, what time we're starting and finishing, things like morning tea and afternoon tea and lunch will be provided. But I also go a little bit deeper. Things like, where might you need to park? Is it free parking or do you need to make sure you have some coins in your pocket? I let them know things like there's tea and coffee available on arrival, so they don't need to stress about whether or not to get a coffee on the way. I even include things like a dress code. For some people, knowing what they're supposed to be wearing when they show up is enough to ease the anxiety so that they feel like they'll be able to fit in. The more information you can provide in the welcome email, the more comfortable people can feel showing up to a different kind of space. A welcome email also serves the purpose for internal processes. And what I mean by that is some people need to think through ideas before they feel comfortable sharing them into a room or bringing them to a discussion. So if you're running a workshop where you're expecting people to contribute on maybe a complex topic, sending out the agenda and some pre-workshop reading material ahead of time can be really helpful. Otherwise, for the internal processes in the room, if they suddenly get the information and are expected to respond straight away, that will be really hard for them. A pre-workshop email helps ease that challenge. The last thing that's useful in a pre-workshop email is an invitation for people to get in touch if there's something they think is useful for you to know. When I frame up my pre-workshop invitation, I never talk about accessibility or neurodiversity or any of those jargony kind of words. I simply say, I really want this workshop to be a great experience for you. If there's something you think I should know ahead of time, please feel free to get in touch. Now, every time I do that, people contact me with all sorts of things. Sometimes it's about neurodiversity, and sometimes it's simply things like, hey, my uncle passed away last week and I'm still feeling a little bit fragile. By keeping the invitation wide, it means people can reach out regardless of what's going on for them. Tip 2 is to build in pondering time. So I already mentioned in the piece around a pre-workshop email that some people need processing time or pondering time in order to be able to contribute to a discussion. Now, sending the information ahead of time is one way to do that, and for complex or deep topics, that's important. But equally in the workshop, even if the conversation or the topic feels light to you, there'll be a lot of people in the room who need time to think. So building in deliberate pondering time is a really important aspect of creating space for contribution. Now, creating pondering time doesn't have to be difficult. It might sound something like, in a moment, I'm going to invite you to form small groups and talk about XYZ. But before I do that, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 moments on your own to think about what you might like to say. Or it might be inviting people to draw a picture to represent whatever your question is. In that drawing time, it gives people time to think and ponder and really articulate their thoughts. Pondering time doesn't necessarily need to be long, but it does need to be a few minutes for people to gather their thoughts before the loud, extroverted, process out loud people jump on in. Tip 3 is to make sure that in your workshops you give people a choice as to how they contribute. I've got a lovely friend, Shaheen, who's based in Sydney, and she specialises in inclusive facilitation. She's always reminding me that contribution isn't always verbal. How can you encourage people in the workshop to contribute in ways that are not just about speaking out loud? Some brains don't work in verbal processing. They might like to write it on a post-it note. They might like to draw out what they're thinking. They might like to choose a picture to represent. No one way to contribute is correct, so make sure that you're building in lots of different ways to contribute so that you're designing for everybody in the room. One thing that Shaheen shared with me that I thought was totally mind-blowing, particularly in community workshops, is allowing people to contribute in their own language. Imagine being invited to share your feedback and you have the opportunity to share in your first language and not just using English as a default. Tip 4, be conscious of the physical space. When you're designing and facilitating a workshop, it's not just about the content, it's about the physical space that you create and how people are sitting and contributing and moving within that space. So you need to think about things like temperature and lighting and seating and distractions. How easy is it for people to stand up and move around? Do they have things to fidget with if they really can't stand still? Now, there is no one-size-fits-all physical environment, but you can think about things with low stimulus, even temperature, and lots of natural light. That's not just good for people who are neurodiverse, that's good for everyone. Tip 5 is to remember not to put people in boxes. My friend Mark Jackman is an inclusive designer and he is also autistic. One of his favourite lines is, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. In other words, it's easy to put people with a particular diagnosis into a box and say these are all the traits that this particular diagnosis presents with. And it's simply not true. If you are designing with neurodiversity in mind, you have to realize that different people need different things and there's a whole bunch of different things you might need to consider. That means mixing up your workshop. There will be some activities that feel a little more uncomfortable for some than others, but as you go through, they will find different ways of fitting into the sequence. You're designing for multiple brains, which means you need to design your workshop in multiple different ways. Variety is the key for getting all brains engaged. Of course, designing for neurodiverse participants is one way that you can encourage participation and contribution. But neurodiversity is not the only reason people may not be contributing. There's other factors that keep people quiet in a workshop setting. In my next video, Facilitation Tools and Techniques for Engaging Quiet Participants, I share 5 reasons why people may not be engaging and give you some really practical tools and tips for how you can encourage those quiet voices into the room. The link is in the description below. Go check it out.